It's officially 10 a.m. on the East Coast, which means it's time for us to get started. So good morning and welcome to this Innovation Leader Masterclass. I'm Caitlin Milliken and I am our multimedia editor. For those of you who don't know, welcome to Innovation Leader. For folks who are new, we like to say we're relentlessly focused on providing resources that large companies can use to improve their innovation programs. Our content is designed to help you understand the latest innovation techniques and compare your approach to other companies. Our resources include masterclasses like this one today, as well as research reports, independent case studies, roundtables, and online events. You can check out all of that good stuff on our website, innovationleader.com. Today, I'm joined by Nathan Jacob, Ian Hunt, and Aimee Reynolds. Nathan is the Europe, Middle East, and Africa General Manager at Planbox, one of our strategic partners. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Planbox is a pioneering provider of AI-powered agile innovation management software and services. Ian Hunt is the head of Novartis Genesis Labs, and Aimee is the Genesis Labs project liaison. Today, our presenters are going to discuss what it means to unboss innovation and how to develop, manage, and scale an innovation program in a large company. So that is my very short introduction. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan, who's going to kick us off.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, really looking forward to jumping into today's demonstration presentation. Sorry, guys. But really just to start and firstly with a very brief introduction. My name is Nathan Jacob. I'm the EMEA General Manager here at Planbox. Now, as mentioned, as a leader in the innovation management space, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the world's most innovative organizations and really see what helps them win regardless of size and regardless of industry. Now, one of the common conversations I have with a lot of my clients is around collaboration. And how best to harness the power it can bring to the innovation process. Now, ultimately, innovation is a collaborative process by nature, so it really is instrumental in delivering the business outcomes that you set to achieve. Now, to begin today's sessions, guys, I thought I would put the question in everyone's mind, what is collaboration? Now, what we'll be running is a bit of an interactive part of today's session where I'd like to hear from you all on the call about what the first word is that jumps to mind when we say collaboration. Now, we're going to be doing this through a word cloud. So there will be a link available for you all in the chat box. So if you could click the link in the chat box, and this will take you through to the screen where you can submit your thoughts. Now, again, just to reiterate what we're looking for, the first word that jumps to mind when we talk about collaboration. So I'm just going to give everyone a few moments to do that. Again, the link will be in the chat box, guys. So if we could all get involved, that would be great. Terra, that's a new one. Interesting. Partnership. Great, some really great words coming through here, guys. So just give it another 30 seconds. Yeah, some really interesting words here, guys. Great, so at that point, I think we've got some really good words here. So thank you for everyone who has participated and submitted their first word on collaboration. So I'd just like to take a moment from anyone on the team. Are there any words that are popping out here that, maybe are surprising you? I know that Terra here was one that stood out to me as quite a surprising submission. Aimee, Ian, any comments on any of these that you think are surprising here?
Now the terror one, I think, was definitely a little bit surprising.
Great. Brilliant. So I'm just going to jump back to the presentation, but I think, what we can definitely take from that is that there's many different words that we can associate, with collaboration. Now, I thought a really good way to maybe put this into perspective, the dictionary definition tells us that collaboration is the action of working with someone, to produce something. But how does that really translate into innovation? So in relation to innovation, this could really touch upon how we as an organization engage and work with all of the members of our ecosystem to help address and solve business challenges. Now, that ecosystem can consist of your employees, clients, partners, academia, the government, the startup community, or even expert solver communities to help achieve the strategic objectives laid out before us. Now, even the most innovative and fast-moving organizations don't know everything, so it's really important to work alongside your innovation community to really harness and take advantage of the collective knowledge that's available to you. Now, a great example of collaboration can be seen with NASA and the Apollo spacecrafts. Now, in 1961, JFK released his famous statement to get a man on the moon and bring them back within the decade. What then proceeded was really one of the best examples of collaboration known to man. Now, as you can imagine, there are many components that went into creating a spacecraft that had the capabilities to get to the moon and, more importantly, get back. What we can see here is really how NASA collaborated with various experts to achieve that objective. They collaborated with the Grumman Aircraft Company to develop the lunar module, which was a separate vehicle designed to land on the moon and then return to lunar orbit. They engaged with North American Aviation, also known as Rockwell, to develop the spacecraft lunar module, which connected the service module itself to the rocket. We can then also see how NASA collaborated with Lockheed Martin to develop the launch escape system, which, in my opinion, is the #1 feature that I would want on a space rocket. And this was created in case of emergency and really would allow the cabin crew to be pushed away from the launch vehicle should they have needed to abort the mission. Now, in reality, the collaboration didn't stop there. Each one of these businesses, whether it be Lockheed Martin, Grumman Aircraft Company, or Rockwell, will have then collaborated with their ecosystem of experts in order to achieve their specific objective in relation to the mission. Now, in summary, NASA recognized that they could not achieve this feat alone and ultimately collaborated with a large network of experts to help them make this happen. We would have not put a man on the moon without this exceptional demonstration of cross-functional collaboration in order to achieve a common and clear goal. Now, 50 years on, it's become abundantly clear that we don't need to wait for a mission to the moon to develop an ecosystem for innovation. Rather, it's become a strategic focus area to help drive a real lasting competitive advantage in the marketplace. Now, I'm very excited to be able to introduce you again to Aimee and Ian from the Novartis Genesis Labs program. I think Genesis Labs is a supreme example of how effective collaboration can be and the exceptional results that it can generate. So on that note, Ian and Aimee, I'll pass over to you, and thanks again for your time, guys.
Thank you, Nathan. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Just a brief introduction. My name's Ian Hunt. I lead the Genesis program at Novartis. I've been at Novartis 15 or so years. Interestingly, the concept came from a sabbatical I enjoyed in human resources of all the strangest of places at Novartis in 2017, which is an interesting story on its own. Before we go into the Genesis program, I just want to kind of provide a little bit of framing in terms of why we set the program up, because it has kind of an interesting kind of resonance. So briefly, Novartis, hopefully most of you know who Novartis is a focused medicine company, a large pharmaceutical company with $47.4 billion in net sales in 2019. Key drugs we market are Cosentyx, Gilenya, Lucentis, and Entresto, Kymira, which is a novel CAR therapy, and then Alaris, an innovative IL-1 beta antibody for autoimmune diseases. Naturally, for a big pharmaceutical company, research and development is at the heart of the organization, fueling an innovative medicines business unit and also a generics organization called Sandoz. Research is housed, and you'll hear these acronyms a lot in this presentation. Research is housed under an organization called NIBR, the Novartis Institutes for Biomedical Research. We have labs in Switzerland, Cambridge, San Diego, San Francisco, and Shanghai. And then our sister organization, so we develop the drugs, and then we have a global development organization which runs the clinical trials. There's a third kind of large business unit, technical operations, which you'll hear again in this presentation, which is in essence kind of makes the drugs, manufactures the drugs. So R&D, research and development. There's 23,000 people supporting R&D in Novartis. We have a very deep pipeline, 160 pipeline projects ongoing in 2020, with 24 regulatory approvals in 2019. It's one of the deepest and richest pipelines in the industry. Many of those drugs on the market and in development have been developed in NIBA. Okay, next slide, Nathan, please. Now, to continue to successfully deliver kind of really truly innovative medicines to our patients and compete with the ever-expanding world of biotech, the organization embarked on a journey to unboss itself a few years ago, a place where associates are empowered to pursue their own ideas, leaders set clear goals and remove obstacles and trust their teams. And the success of the team is very, very much more valued than the leader or the individual, okay? Now, a key aspect of this whole unbossing notion is to really unleash the power of 110,000 people within the organization and leverage the institutional knowledge within those across the organization. And in the process, hopefully create a lot more agile and a lot more entrepreneurial organization, which, while one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, operates with a mindset and an agility of a startup. Sounds easy, right? So that's where Genesis enters. Next slide, please, Nathan. So in 2017, we launched Genesis. In essence, it's an internal startup program with two kind of underlying goals. One is recognizing many ideas and concepts kind of come from a tiny sliver of our organization, and many ideas kind of lay fallow and undeveloped and unheard of. And so what we wanted to do with the program is really create a new channel to kind of nurture those concepts and from grassroots level, and really kind of unleash the value of all our people. And secondly, also to create kind of a new innovation stream to really accelerate the prototyping and de-risking of new concepts. And so everybody at Novartis is encouraged to do kind of like, innovative kind of like skunk work project, but it's on the top of probably 5 or 6 other projects which you're tasked with. And you do this work on a Friday afternoon, but obviously it's going to take a long time. And what we wanted to do with the program is take the very best of those ideas and kind of give those scientists and those associates the time and the place to really kind of develop them in a very much more agile and kind of like focused effort. So they're the two goals. And next slide, please, Nathan. So what do associates get in this program? They get seed funding to engage in their own work for up to 18 months. And this is a kind of key piece. So we pull them out of the organization for those 18 months. So rather than working on 6 other projects, they're fully focused, fully dedicated on their idea. And they'll get access to institutional knowledge from the organization to try and make that happen. And we assign a mentor for them. So to look after them and steer them through their journey. A key thing here, it's not just one person. We're trying to encourage and nurture teams to kind of come together, self-assemble, and we give them the space to explore and test their idea. So what does Novartis get from this? Well, hopefully we accelerate some of these skunk work projects in a much more agile way. And I'll touch on this in a later slide. And second, it's also a terrific opportunity to grow associates. And again, I'll touch on this in a later slide, but the teams in this program really, they get to know business, develop business kind of skill sets, kind of run their own budgets, develop better communication skills. So hopefully people who come out of this after 18 months, they become a lot stronger and a lot more entrepreneurial. See this a lot. So next slide, Nathan. So the programs run through a request for application process. So at the start of the year, and we run this kind of every couple of years, we started the year, we asked for kind of big, bold ideas in around a number of key thematic areas. Teams submit their ideas, and through a kind of review process, we identify a shortlist. And this takes 2 or 3 months. There's a lot of which Aimee will touch on in a later slide, because we wanted to not just identify and help the very best. We want to try and nurture some of the more nascent ideas which perhaps aren't ready for funding, but we want to try and encourage their development. So there's this kind of early ideation when we want to try and develop ideas. The more compelling ideas, they get invited to a pitch day, which is broadcast to everybody in the organization. They pitch their idea to senior Novartis executives. Obviously, that's kind of a daunting task. And ahead of that, we invite the teams to a boot camp when we kind of provide kind of presentation skill coaching. We help them nurture and develop their concepts and kind of create early business plans. And we also look under the hood to make sure we have a freedom to operate if we're going to fund this project. So there's a lot of kind of, once we've found those kind of most compelling ideas, there's a little bit of kind of like support to make sure that if we are funding them, we have a path forward. Okay, next slide. So one of the aspirations of the program is trying to connect people and technologies across the Novartis ecosystem. And so, as I alluded to, we have scientists from a variety of different labs and technology groups around the world. And so we wanted to try and, you know, connect these people together to try and encourage and nurture interdisciplinary teams. So have we done that? Well, I think we have. Of the 11 teams we've funded, many of those kind of cut across kind of interdisciplinary areas, which has been a terrific story. Next slide. Okay, so in 2017, we launched RFA1, Request for Application 1. This was very much targeted specifically in NIBR. Now, remember in my earlier slide, NIBR is the early research organization where we develop or prototype some of these early drugs. We received 90 proposals across the kind of like 3 or 4 major sites from 300 associates, and 11 teams pitched to our head of research. And we funded 5. And those 5, which is interesting to note, 4 of them, after their 18 months, kind of reintegrated into the organization as pipeline projects. It's a pretty good deal. The following year, we launched RFA2, and we had this hypothesis, because of the success of RFA1, does this kind of concept resonate across the other divisions of Novartis into development, into manufacturing? And one of the other reasons we expanded the program is, could we encourage collaboration between some of these different divisions, which historically have kind of operated quite independently. So we received 166 proposals from 22 sites, Novartis sites across the world. 2,000 associates participated. So there's a huge, big scale up and a big success. 9 teams pitched and six projects are funded. Now, very recently, in fact, this week, these teams have kind of like presented their readouts to senior leaders. And there's every expectation that many of these will continue into pipeline projects. But the bottom line is that the process is really encouraging kind of new technologies to be developed within the organization. A couple of highlight projects. So the types of projects are very much enabling technology projects. One was a collaboration with MIT. So this is one of the aspirations we really wanted to try and kind of test, is can we kind of create a new way of collaborating or testing kind of external technologies. So one was a Wi-Fi device developed by MIT, and we wanted to see, or we had an idea that it could potentially be applied to help expedite clinical trial development. So that was our idea. So we took this external tech, which has been developed by MIT, for something completely different, and we kind of worked for 18 months to kind of see if that worked. Another one was leveraging machine learning and image recognition technologies to apply to pathology, to slide recognition. This has subsequently been spun out into a large European framework grant of about $40 million, open up to a variety of different SMEs, pharmaceutical companies. So the program is really helping seed and develop, nurture some of these kind of new ideas, not just for Novartis, but for the broader kind of scientific ecosystem as well. So next slide, Nathan, please. So that touches very much on the kind of scientific deliverables, which has been terrific to see. The other hypothesis we had when we started the program is to try and nurture a much more entrepreneurial way of doing and being, to be kind of, you know, being a little bit more unbossed. And that was our hypothesis. Did it work? Well, yes. And in almost all the cases of the projects, the tenacity and speed of the teams has been remarkable, remarkably more accelerated than our traditional project teams. And there's a variety of reasons for this, I think. One is they're fully dedicated, so they haven't got 10 other projects they're working on. Second, there's a tenacity and an empowerment on the teams because it's their idea, which has been terrific to see. And so we're trying to take some of these learnings and apply them more broadly across the organization. And it has been a really terrific place to kind of like nurture kind of cross-disciplinary technology development as well. How we run this is fairly lean. So Aimee and I are the only kind of like people on the project apart from the teams. And so we try and reduce the amount of bureaucracy around the teams and make them more like a startup, so they don't have to report into leadership meetings to get approval or transition their project through milestones. So it's very lean, reduce the bureaucracy, and just kind of trust them to do their work for 18 months. And it's been remarkably successful. Feedback from the team members has been, best thing I've ever done at Novartis. Really, truly accelerated, technology work, which we've been talking about for years and years, but never been able to kind of, do or execute, or has taken too long. So it's been, touch wood, to date, it's been terrifically successful. So I'm going to pause now. That's just kind of like providing a little bit of framework in terms of why we launched the project and where it's come from. And now Aimee is going to spend a little bit of time talking about RFA3, which we launched last year using PlanBox, which is an interesting story just because of COVID-19. So over to you, Aimee.
Thank you, Ian. And I will briefly introduce myself. So I am Aimee Reynolds. I've actually been at Novartis for 12 years. The first 10 years I was in the development unit, so developing formulation and drug delivery systems. Then I joined Ian on the Genesis Labs program in May 2019, where one of the main parts of my role is to serve as the primary contact for our Genesis Labs team, so checking in, making sure that they are making progress. And then in my role, I was also responsible for overseeing RFA3, so our third call for applications. So next slide. So we launched RFA3 actually in December 2019 across 5 thematic areas. And we had learned from our other cohorts that if your innovation projects are already aligned with organizational strategy, it's a lot easier to find a home for them at the end of Genesis Labs. So there are 5 thematic areas. 4 were closely aligned with strategic pillars. So these included new and repurposed technology platforms, data and digital, patient-centric medicine, but then we also included a white space category for ideas that didn't fall within current Novartis strategy. So what we said to our associates is, if your idea is selected, you get 18 months to convince the organization that your out-of-strategy idea should actually be in. So for RFA3, we again partnered with our collaborators in development, but this time, for the first time, we also expanded to our generics division and associates in Sandoz. So the expansion to Sandoz, we truly were reaching out to all of the research and development associates across the globe. So Ian mentioned that we did already have some programs that were, across sites and involved global teams. But this time with RFA3, we asked, with more than 20,000 associates across the organization, how do we really ensure that we are harnessing the collective knowledge of all to make sure we're bringing the right people together so that the best ideas could bubble up from the top during the application process? Could we do things even better? Next slide, please. So for RFA3, we decided to partner with PlanBox and to run an initial open ideation phase with our RFA. So for 2 months, colleagues were encouraged to submit ideas, comment on other ideas, share the ideas with people in their network that might be able to help. And then at the end of that time period, we would go through those ideas, and we had a team of reviewers from across research, across development, from Sandoz, that would select the very best ideas and invite them to submit full proposals. So in a normal year, the teams with the selected ideas would then come together, refine their concepts, build out their teams, and then ultimately we would invite the top teams to come and pitch their ideas in Cambridge. So this was our plan, and then the pandemic happened. Next. And next slide, please. So I think as Ian mentioned, we're always encouraging our teams to be agile and flexible. But with RFA3, it turned out that we had to be flexible too. So right away, we pivoted, we extended our deadlines, recognizing that there were now many extenuating circumstances for the idea submitters due to the pandemic. And then our submitters also had to pivot. So teams that maybe would have, congregated in person around the water cooler to hash out their ideas were suddenly needing to learn how to collaborate on Microsoft Teams. And then for the first time ever, we had to pivot to a virtual pitch. So instead of inviting teams to Cambridge to present to a team of Novartis leaders, everyone was invited to present from their own living rooms. So this was how we ended up finishing and concluding RFA3. I'm happy to say that despite all of the setbacks that the pandemic threw at us, we were still able to bring RFA3 to a successful close and identify projects to form the next cohort of Genesis Labs teams. Next slide, please. So we had completed our idea submission phase just before we went into lockdown, with 160 ideas for Genesis Labs projects submitted onto Planbox. We're excited to see those ideas come in from across the globe. Perhaps not surprisingly, a large number of ideas did come from Switzerland and the United States, which are headquarters to both our development and our NIBR research colleagues, respectively. But then we also saw a lot of ideas coming in from Austria, from Slovenia, home to many of our Sandoz associates. So we really are seeing ideas coming in from across the research and development organization. What we were perhaps even more excited to see was that we had 467 comments submitted on those ideas. And I'll say, I actually read almost all of those comments. And these are not just friends of the idea authors saying congratulations for submitting an idea. These are actually people who are engaged, who want to help develop the idea, who are connecting people to other colleagues that they knew that they thought might be able to help or wanted to help them build out their team. The Planbox, we could actually check how many people had engaged with the platform. And we saw that 3,870 associates had actually logged on during the course of RFA3. So for a large corporation like Novartis, and a program like Genesis Labs, which ultimately is only really going to be available to a few selected teams, getting almost 4,000 people to log on and view ideas is a pretty significant level of engagement. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons we had wanted to use Planbox was to connect those people all across the organization. So in a large corporation like Novartis, building up collaborations across divisions can be challenging. Different divisions have different priorities, different goals, budgets, different leaders, and are spread out throughout different sites. But of course, this is where Genesis Labs comes in. And we did see that of the ideas submitted by our NIBR research colleagues, almost half of them actually involved collaborators from other divisions. And with our development colleagues in GDD, about a quarter of the idea involved cross-divisional collaboration. So another thing we can see on the right is something within Planbox where you can actually look at collaboration communities. So what this represents are groups of people that were commenting on similar ideas or seemed interested in similar themes. So on the left, all of the different shades represent a different community linked around a similar idea. Now, what we saw is that most of these communities involved associates from multiple divisions. So we can see that we are really collecting or connecting colleagues from across divisions across the organization. I'd also like to share a great story about one of the teams that was ultimately selected. So with this team, there were researchers in Cambridge that submitted the idea onto the Planbox platform. And then someone from the Regulatory Affairs Group in Development, so sitting over in Basel in Switzerland, submitted a fairly humble comment saying, I think we should meet. I might be able to help. It turns out that colleague was actually the first author on the paper that the research team had based their whole entire project around. So ultimately, the two connected on PlanBox. He's now joined the core team, and they are working together to turn that idea into a reality. Next slide, please. So that is one really, I think, nice example of the networking that was enabled by PlanBox. But we also sent out a survey to all of the people who submitted ideas on the platform. And we asked them, did you make any new connections through your time in RFA3? And we were happy to see that the vast majority, so over 2/3 of the people said yes, they had connected with at least one other person. And in fact, 1/3 of the respondents said that they had met 3 or more new people by joining and contributing to PlanBox. So this shows that we really are helping to develop networks across the organization. So another nice way to view this on PlanBox is in the figure on the right. So this actually shows all of the individuals who either submitted ideas or added comments to the platform. And again, people are clustered together based on showing an interest in related topics and related ideas. But then you can see a number of lines that go across that are showing colleagues who are connecting seemingly unrelated people and unrelated ideas together. So this is a nice way to visualize that we really were developing an innovation ecosystem with RFA3. So next slide. So ultimately, in the end of RFA3, we invited 12 teams to our virtual pitch day. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that we really need to take opportunities to turn challenges into new ways of working. So although we missed gathering together with teams in person in that week leading up to pitch day, the pivot to virtual allowed us to actually be more inclusive of other colleagues around the organization. So normally, because there's always going to be some travel budget restrictions, we are limited on the number of people from a team that can actually join and participate on stage in Cambridge. Also, the audience is fairly limited to a few hundred people who can join in the auditorium. Now, we do broadcast it to other sites. I'm sure, as you can imagine, the level of engagement just isn't quite the same if you're viewing at a different location as it is if you're actually in person in the auditorium where everyone is pitching. But of course, pivoting to a virtual pitch changed all that. So what this means is we then said to all of our teams that they could invite up to 6 people to join them on stage. So during the virtual pitch and participate in the Q&A session. And also we could broadcast this globally to all of our colleagues across the organization, and everyone could be watching that in their homes, no matter where their homes were. So this helped to make it more inclusive for the entire organization, something that is so necessary when we are trying to build up a culture of collaboration. So doing it this way, we actually had almost 1,500 associates who tuned in live to watch pitch day on August 31st. And then we've had many, many more who've actually watched recordings of the different teams afterwards. So when we got to the end of RFA3, we ended up selecting 4 project teams to form the 3rd cohort of Genesis Labs projects. One of these teams actually includes colleagues from our earliest, so research, colleagues from development, and then even colleagues from our generics unit. So I have to say, I think it's difficult to imagine without an initiative like Genesis Labs bringing together such a cross-divisional project in an organization as large as Novartis. Next slide, please. So let's return back to the idea of unbossed that Ian started the talk with. So Ian told you about Novartis's journey toward creating a more unbossed culture. Hopefully he convinced you that Genesis Labs has really helped support our selected teams to pursue unbossed research. But what about the rest of the organization? So again, unbossed really just means building out a culture of collaboration. So we want to involve everybody instead of just the few. So let's look at some of the key qualities and attributes of being unbossed. Next. Sorry. Thank you. All right, so we want people who are curious, willing to take risks, and share new ideas. And did we achieve that with RFA3? Well, I think we definitely inspired curiosity. We had nearly 4,000 people who checked out ideas on Planbox and almost 1,500 who tuned in to pitch day. Then, using Planbox, we encouraged psychological safety of our colleagues who are willing to put themselves out there and propose what sometimes might seem like crazy, transformative ideas on the platform. Then we saw other colleagues who felt willing and safe to provide comments, provide feedback, make new connections, and build their network. And then, of course, we saw many ideas shared. As I mentioned, we saw 160 new ideas and proposals for Genesis Labs projects, which led to 4 that have been funded by Genesis Labs, but many more that are advancing in big and small ways across the organization. So I have to say, I think that partnering with Planbox truly helped us advance unbossed innovation at Novartis. And now I will turn it back over to Nathan, so he can tell you a little more about what they could do for you.
Awesome. Really quickly, before we get over to you, Nathan, we have so many questions in the chat. People's interest are really piqued, and I want to take 2 quick ones before we get to you. One comes from Robert, who asks, what happens to projects/concepts after Genesis Labs 18 months and ownership? And like, how do you advance the further maturation of these concepts and new business propositions? Aimee or Ian, I don't know if you want to give a really quick answer to how that typically works.
Can I take that one, Aimee?
Okay, so we work with the teams to sort of try and develop a business case toward the end of their time in Genesis Labs. So for projects that are going to move forward, we tell them they have to start thinking as if they're going for, say, that Series B funding. So we look for one of the home organizations, so whether that's our chemistry department or biologics department, to really become the next primary owner and investor. And what I think we try and get teams to think about is it's never too early to start reaching out to those stakeholders. So I think with each successive cohort, we're getting them to think about it earlier and earlier. Cohort 3 has just started, and we're doing that in their team kickoff, thinking about who will take this on at the end of Genesis Labs. What data do we need to convince them that this is worth investing and moving forward in the organization? So that's the ultimate goal of our projects and how they advance.
Wonderful. Same questioner, Robert, wanted to know if Genesis Labs was a top-down or bottom-up initiative, and where the mandate for it initially came from.
So that's actually a really interesting story, which would probably take another hour. So it was a bottom-up idea. It was several of myself and a couple of other colleagues we've been talking about it for a long time in the coffee shops in Cambridge and in the bars, and we kind of like persuaded our new head of research that it was such a good idea, and I was lucky enough to I spent almost 2 years actually building it on a sabbatical in HR. So it was kind of bottom up, but we looked out in terms of it was a perfect storm because we had a new head of research and a new CEO who really understood why this type of program could be really powerful for the organization. So it's a bit of both. If you're curious, there's a really nice case study we wrote with Aimee Edmondson at Harvard about the program. So that's worth checking out.
Great. And this is my final question before I toss it over to Nathan. Anything that, everything else we'll try and get to in the Q&A portion. Anything we don't get to, I will send to our presenters directly. That way they can answer them after the call is concluded. This one comes from Daniel, who says, assuming not all good ideas come from people who are able to successfully pitch them, how do you keep good ideas from being passed over, if the person's pitching presentation skills are not all there?
Aimee, do you want to start and I'll fill in?
I mean, one thing I will say is we heavily coach the selected teams. And we do ask for volunteers from the teams, but we've made a big effort, particularly for the current RFA, to encourage women that might be a little more hesitant to step up to the stage, to really take a risk and be willing to, join the pitch. But I think the Genesis Labs pitches, by the time that they're coached, we bring an external coach in who is just amazing, who gets them through like the training. I mean, they all could, I think, be professional pitchers at the end. But the teams can choose, and sometimes it's not the original ideator on the team. We've definitely had some teams that even the idea generator is not the one who actually pitches. And as Ian pointed out at the beginning, these are teams, they're not individuals.
Yeah, and it just, I mean, you would have thought, this must be an extrovert's paradise and it's not really kind of supporting introverts. It's not true. As Aimee alluded to, we spend a lot of time helping the teams. So that's a big part of this, is not just kind of building these scientific concepts. It's actually there's a cultural kind of growth opportunity. And so we spend a lot of time working with the teams to make sure that they do their best, give their best presentation. And a lot of them come out of it and go, wow, I've learned so much. It's brilliant, and a lot of introverts are in cohort teams which have been successful and are surprised at how good they are at presenting.
I also think it's worth just mentioning that the science, I think, speaks the loudest. And this time, we have, just like we had virtual challenges today with Ian, some of our colleagues from some of the sites did have some virtual connectivity issues during pitch day. I think there was a 4-second delay with our colleagues from Slovenia. But one of those teams was one of the 4 that was selected. So even though there were technical challenges that might have seemed to, impair, how nice the pitch was, the science still came across, and the science really is what led to them being selected.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that really quick Q&A interlude. We'll be back with more question and answer closer to the end of the presentation. I'll toss it back to Nathan, who's going to continue moving us forward. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Aimee and Ian, for sharing details on this initiative. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next few years holds for Genesis Labs. So thanks again for presenting that. Now, as we've covered today, driving cross-departmental collaboration through a centralized system of record for innovation can really produce some powerful results. Here at Planbox, we've been working with clients like Novartis in helping shape and deploy these innovation programs for over 20 years. Through the 400 deployments of the solution that we have, that engages over 5 million individuals within the innovation process, we've really been able to develop a winning framework to ensure that the clients that we work with and their program for innovation is both sustainable and repeatable. Now, we also look outside of the centralized platform for innovation and also offer an expert solver community, which consists of over 20,000 experts globally. Now, this is a really great community that can act as an extension to your current ecosystem and really help you solve some of the most difficult challenges that may be facing your business. Now, whether that be leveraging a solution to tap into the collective intelligence of your ecosystem, as Novartis have described today, or using a pre-existing network to help solve some of those organizational challenges, Planbox offers a widespread and robust set of capabilities to really help you achieve those goals. Now, we appreciate, when we talk about innovation, this may mean different things to different companies. And we have really helped organizations right across the spectrum when it comes to the outcomes that they wish to achieve. This can include crowdsourcing ideas and being able to apply that workflow-driven process to automate and help whittle down the ideas to really identify the best ones to move forward with, like we did with Verizon. This could also include looking at engaging with external stakeholders, such as partners or suppliers, or even implementing design thinking methodology to really bring the customer to the heart of the design process, like we did with Whirlpool. Now, there are many different use cases available within the Planbox solution, and we really do offer compelling products to really encompass and cover the entire innovation lifecycle. Now, when looking at the Planbox solution, we cover the end-to-end innovation process, starting with helping employees discover the trends and big opportunities that they really should be focusing on. Once we've identified these through the unique methodology that we apply to the discovery process, we then provide an operationalized framework for you to engage with the relevant members of your ecosystem in order to find a solution for that opportunity. Within this framework, we can then collect these ideas while leveraging patented artificial intelligence technology that really allows you to take advantage of the vast amounts of data that will be surrounding the business and pull that into the innovation process to act as a source of inspiration to help your users submit unique and winning ideas. Leveraging the unique capabilities for evaluation within Planbox will then help you identify the top submissions, and then we help create a full business case through our interactive and collaborative business model canvases, all while maintaining a strong set of innovation KPIs and governance through the comprehensive reporting engine that sits above every element of this platform. Once we have selected these winning ideas, what we can then cater for is agile experimentation, really helping organizations build rapid prototypes through a series of sprints and really help to identify whether to fail fast and fail cheap or to move forward and apply more resource to a certain idea. This then all leads into our innovation portfolio management tool, which will allow you then to track and measure all of the innovation projects that you're working on and really focus on project delivery and project execution. Now, when we get to this point, it really helps close the loop as you commercialize and launch the solutions that have made their way through the innovation funnel. Now, again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. If anyone would like a quick chat with me around their innovation program and how Planbox may be able to help, similar to some of the stuff that we've done with Novartis, feel free to reach out to me directly. My details will be made available after the call, but I really wanted to make sure we had some free time at the end to answer some of these great questions that have been coming through on the chat box. I've been itching to share some of these with the guys. So on that note, I'll pass over to you, Kate, and we can run through a few more of these questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nathan. And if you could conclude screen sharing, that would be wonderful. That way Absolutely. Everyone can see our wonderful panelists. We have so many amazing questions. So I want to kick off with one from Anna, who asks about getting support for the program. She writes, how do you get their support? I imagine managers wouldn't be happy to lose their best employees for 18 months. So if you want to kick us off,
that's a good,
or Ian.
So that's a really good question. So that was one of our kind of concerns at the start, right? You're pulling some of the best kind of like scientists out of the organization for 18 months. And initially that was a bit of a concern, but when the home organizations saw what was happening to the scientists, but also the projects, that kind of was a little bit more relaxed. One of the kind of big aspects of the program, and actually which is half of the program's budget, is we reimburse the home organizations for the salaries of the people who go into the program. Now they can use that money fairly flexibly. They can hire somebody else at risk to replace a person. They could use the money to leverage a CRO or a contractor. They can do that use that money whatever way they want. So there's not a hole left in the organization. There is a very clear expectation that the person who has left, there's a place for them when they return as well. So that's a kind of a key part of the program, and why I think it's been quite successful is we're not completely handicapping other parts of the organization for the program.
Great. And this question has come up quite a few times in the chat. What happens to the ideas that don't get chosen, that get passed over, and how do you manage the backlog of ideas?
Aimee, you want to take this one?
Sure. So we actually have collected and have Excel files of all the ideas that have been submitted for the 3 RFAs that we've had. And I'll say I get requests from different functions, line functions, on an occasional basis to review those to see if there's ideas that maybe weren't quite appropriate for Genesis Labs, but they now want to take forward. We also have examples of collaborations that started because of Genesis Labs, and people that say having to really think through and articulate their idea and sort of put together a business plan helped them be able to justify it back through normal channels and move it forward. And there are multiple cases, collaborations, initiatives that have proceeded that way. with our teams, like some of the ones that we think are highest rated that don't move forward. Ian and I also try and reach out to our networks, go to leadership, see if there's other ways to at least get elements of them brought forward. So we do try, and the hope is always that it's not just the ones who receive the Genesis Labs funding, but that we're catalyzing innovation in general across the organization.
Yeah, no, that's an important part of the program. It's not, as Aimee said, it's not just the ones who are successful. We do try and encourage, help develop and nurture, all of the concepts. Obviously, some need more nurturing than others, but that's a kind of a key aspect of the program, because that's going to fuel, subsequent and future projects into the program too.
And I will say one of our selected teams for RFA3 had actually pitched in RFA1, was not selected in RFA1, refined their idea, came up with a different indication, a different team, came back, pitched again, and this time they were selected and have moved forward. So I think it's great to see the persistence, and that ideas don't necessarily just have to go away and die. Just sometimes you might have to pitch them a few times before they really get traction and advance.
Great. There's a really interesting question from Zane, which I want to toss to the group. How do you manage employee advancement for those who participate in Genesis Lab projects versus those that execute projects in the core business? Does participating in Genesis Labs factor into employees' performances or advancement rating? And if a project is not successful, how does that factor into an employee's advancement? It's a tough one.
That is not tough at all. We're fairly agnostic with it. I think the teams the teams have been, everybody kind of is equally contributing, and I think everybody comes out of it with huge growth opportunities. And so there's not a, which is great, right? So as people are, not clamoring, but people are actually really enthusiastic about kind of seeing this is a really cool opportunity. So I think it's more of it's not a reward. I think people come out of it, it's like, wow, I've really accelerated my growth. And I think that's very positive. And the home organizations see that too. Now so apart from me and Aimee, there's two folks from our P&O organization who work with us very closely and help with those reintegration conversations to make sure scientists are going back, perhaps not in the same box as they came from, but maybe there's a slightly different role because they've grown so much. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes work from P&O to help with those reintegrations, because obviously if you had such a great experience, you don't want to go back to the same box. You've grown too much. And so we do put a lot of emphasis on that to make sure, or try as much as we can do, to to support people's growth.
And it's important to point out, P&O is Novartis' rebranding of the Human Resources Organization.
Oh, sorry, Ian, you'll have to unmute.
Yes, P&O, people and organizations. So yeah, before anybody puts that into the chat line of what P&O means, but that's human resources.
Awesome. So we have a question from Vim that's been echoed a few times in the chat. Do you see different rates of success in different cultures or regions where projects are taking place, or is it pretty uniform throughout?
Let's start with this one, Aimee.
Yeah, we definitely have more colleagues from Cambridge and Basel, which I think is largely because that's where the largest number of people from research sit, or Cambridge and Basel. And Genesis Labs does just naturally lend itself a little bit more toward people who are early research. I think it's a little easier, and these are people who are used to, as part of their job, trying to come up with more sort of innovative concepts instead of thinking about really how to develop other ideas. So we do see a bit more from those people, and I'd say that part of the organization. But have Germany, team that was our last team, my colleagues in Germany, Spain, and Slovenia working together on a project. of other ones that were split between Switzerland and Slovenia. So Slovenia seems to have a lot of people with good ideas contributing as well.
But I think that's one of the great points about the program. I mean, it's such a cool cultural experiment of like different nationalities and different sites. They, you know, a lot of these sites have very different phenotypes just because of where they are and how long they've been there. I mean, our Basel campus has been there forever. I mean, so it is different. But then at the same time, I mean, the mix of nationalities there is truly remarkable. So yes, different teams have different kind of like phenotypes, it's different DNA, but that's what makes this program really interesting, is you can mix all of these different cultures, which is fascinating to see. So that's one of the things I get a lot of energy from, and you learn from that too, which is cool.
Great. And I know we touched on this a bit, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper. When it comes to building teams around a project, how do you decide who you need to be working on something in order to make it successful?
I mean, this is a very bottom-up approach, and that's one of the things that I think does make it successful, that it's people are looking for other people that feel passionate about the same idea. So, you know, when the teams are first coming together, it's pulling different personalities. I mean, you know, sometimes say that the personality and that passion and really wanting to be, or being willing to take risks, can matter more than having the perfect skill set. Although people do, you know, seek out other people with the right skill set, that matters too. But sometimes, you know, that willingness to try new things can matter even more. But these are very much self-assembled. Again, Ian and I have been in the company for a long time, so we have large networks, and we will help teams if they're looking for people. I love connecting people across the organization, so we do what we can as well. But it's really beautiful the way the teams self-assemble.
And that's also one of the, you know, the beauties of PlanBox. That's something what's helped out. You know, PlanBox has really helped us as well in terms of connecting teams which perhaps didn't know about each other or was geographically separated. So I mean, that's one of the really nice readouts by using PlanBox. You begin to see like, oh, I didn't know we were doing that in San Diego, you know, somebody in Basel in Switzerland, and it's been a really good way of kind of like joining teams. So, and that's something we'd like to encourage, because obviously going back to the original premise about can you take 23,000 people and make it feel like a small biotech company when everybody knows everybody else. I mean, that would be, you know, game changing. And that's kind of one of the aspirations of the program, is to try and help, you know, encourage that.
Great. And a quick follow-up question on that point about teams and who's working on a project from Christina. Is there typically a senior business leader that ends up being on board for these projects? Like, is someone assigned, or does it just like organically happen where someone who's very senior hops on?
So each team will have a mentor working with them, and the mentor is usually someone who's pretty senior, and the mentor is there to help, you know, keep them on track and also help with reintegration. So finding a home for the project after Genesis Labs. So it's usually good that that person is well connected and, you know, can influence in the organization. The mentors really are identified by the teams. We ask them to sort of connect with us when they have a few ideas of people they might want to, and based on the history of the program, we know the phenotype that could be good for mentors and, you know, who might be a good mentor. But really, for a cohort that just started, we were pretty happy, and I think in multiple cases, the person we thought of separately who would be the best person was also the person that they had arrived at as who they wanted as their mentor.
And the second piece of this, we put a lot of emphasis on encouraging the teams to kind of do stakeholder management. So that, you know, they do need to engage with senior leaders fairly early on in the process to make sure that there is a sponsor or an adopter at the end of the 18 months. And, you know, the analogy we make is we're like, you know, we're the kind of angel investment, you know, community, but there needs to be some kind of like primary investor at the end of the 18 months. So even when teams are starting, cohort 3 teams are starting now, we try and encourage the teams to talk to these senior leaders to make sure they're on board with the concept and actually helping kind of like craft the strategy, because then that reintegration and that continuance a lot more effective. So the mentor helps, but also we put a lot of emphasis on encouraging the teams to kind of work through it themselves.
Fantastic. All right, we are just at time and I have a few quick announcements, but this was a really great conversation. Thank you so much, Aimee and Ian and Nathan, for putting together something that was so engaging. We had so many questions in the chat, and it's really awesome to see folks so inspired by what you're working on. So we are so glad to have you. Before everyone logs off, I have two quick announcements. First, Innovation Leader is hosting a members-only webcast tomorrow about hiring trends in 2021. So you can join us for that at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss your recent experiences adding to your team or your advice for navigating the job market. You can learn more about that at innovationleader.com/ILLive. We also have our Success Stories virtual event next week on the 28th and the 29th. This event gathers innovation executives together to share best practices for achieving those innovation wins and pivoting from failure. We'll have sessions with leaders from iRobot, Microsoft, L'Oreal, Oreo, 3M, and more. And all attendees will have access to video replays of our best sessions so they can take all of their learnings with them. You can learn more about that at innovationleader.com/success2021. Thank you again for joining us and have a great rest of your day.